Welcome, YouTube. This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the second mixtape by Chance the Rapper. Basically, this mixtape is called Acid Rap, and it came out in the spring of 2013. Now, Chance the Rapper had made a lot of noise in the early 2010s and stuff. He was kind of blowing up with like his mixtape 10 Day and that type stuff. I would have to say this particular mixtape, Acid Rap, had made a lot of noise on DatPiff, got over 1 million downloads, and got the highest certification from them on that website, which was the Diamond certification for getting over 1 million downloads. Like mixtapes like Dream Chasers 2 by Meek Mill and Rick Ross's Rich Forever, or some other ones that got that certification. Not many, maybe Lil Wayne's No Ceilings, a couple of those, but not a ton of real downloads on that website really got to 1 million. And it's surprising that this is kind of one that was one of them. So I just look after it, just being able to say this actually was a pretty heralded mixtape. This is a mixtape that has a wiki article about it, which not every mixtape kind of has that appeal of it. So I would have to say this is a pretty large one. Definitely did a lot of damage in 2013 and basically catapulted Chance the Rapper into like the more sheer spotlight. Like there were projects that he did later like Surf and Coloring Book and some of those type ones. Chance the Rapper was kind of blowing up throughout the mid 2010s. It seemed like he kind of hit a snag with like his The Big Day album from 2019, but for a while there he had like a pretty large buzz. He was on places like Good Morning America and morning television and some of those type things. He really had like a pretty affinity, because the thing about Chance the Rapper was just the fact when he was on songs like I'm the One by DJ Khaled and some of those type moments, he had a lot of commercial appeal just because he had the right orientation. He was kind of like a similar rapper to like Mac Miller and Wiz Khalifa and some of those type folks that kind of did like college rap and more kind of backpacker, kind of druggy, kind of backpacker type rap like Mac Miller kind of did. But the concept about it was is he was commercial also, and he kept that kind of appeal. He's pretty good at doing hooks on this project. That's something that he really has nailed pretty well. So he was a pretty good hook factor and could make some songs commercial. Considering that this mixtape was free, that's a pretty good statement to be able to say that. So it's just a good mixture of some of that particular stuff as far as that kind of went. It's a pretty good mixture as far as some of that stuff kind of went. But the thing about it is this is this is a different kind of appeal towards it. This is not trap. This is not really like gangsta rap and that type of stuff. I definitely feel like this is a lot more. I mean, it has some edge towards it, but I feel like a lot more of this is just kind of like an in-betweener type segment between like backpacker rap and kind of more drug-addled type stuff, where it just kind of feels, where it feels somewhat blue collar, but more oriented towards just like the standard kind of more Tupac on I Get Around type fare, where he's just kind of city hopping and being out and about and just kind of congregating, sleeping on couches, some of that type of stuff, just really out and about, weaving through the cities and that type of stuff. And I like the concept of getting that. It's just kind of an orientation about it, just the fact that Chance the Rapper didn't full blown, do like trap music like every other artist was kind of doing, but it's just kind of the concept where he's not Kanye West, but he's also not, or I'll say he's not like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, but he's also not Kanye West entirely either. So it's just kind of the concept is just kind of an in-between kind of valve where it just feels like, I mean, some of this album kind of feels like jazz rap, acid jazz, it kind of feels like, and some of these are kind of East Coast tinge and kind of have like that jazz kind of feel about it that just really kind of feels like oriented towards like a more, I mean, there's some folks on here like Action Bronson that are kind of from the East Coast, so it does kind of have like a slight ode to East Coast, but I kind of look after it. It's just interesting because I want to say, I'm not really sure where Chance the Rapper is from. Yeah, Chance the Rapper is from Chicago, so it's kind of underneath the concept that that's kind of Midwest still, but I do feel like there is some orientations towards like some kind of East Coast big city type feels about it, so it's definitely kind of the concept. But there were some singles on this mixtape, which is pretty awesome. So there were more than one. I like the concept about it is because most of the time when a mixtape gets a hit single, it's only like one, but there are two on here. So the first single is Juice. This is kind of what I talk about with Juice is kind of what I'm talking about with it kind of being more big city type feels. And Juice is kind of what I'm talking about with it being more big city and kind of more East Coast orientation, where Juice is a very much big city kind of stepping out kind of bop. It's got a real ritzy jive about it, and it feels like a Rat Pack type tune. If you know about the Rat Pack and some of that type stuff from way back in like the 60s, 70s, that type feel as far as that kind of goes, late 50s. It really kind of has that kind of more almost blue blood. It has that almost blue blood type bravado about it. It just really feels a lot more ritzy than I was expecting. It's just a lot more of like a New York kind of show-stopping kind of orientation about it. It's just the concept, and I really like the kind of jazzy. I really like the ritzy kind of jazzy chorus that Chance the Rapper has on Juice. It's just a nice sing-songy one. Just the fact that this is on a free project is pretty good. It's commercial. I definitely like the concept about it. I'd say this is a pretty nice bop just for a mixtape orientation, as far as just getting a nice one for that sort of sound, where it's not just completely dislike. It just feel it stands out. It's that's definitely the thing about it. It stands out like a sore thumb compared to most mixtape bops. I mean, I think I would definitely say, apart from Mac Miller and maybe Wiz Khalifa on a different orientation of a day, I'd say that there's not too many folks that kind of had songs terribly like this. It's kind of East Coast, but it's also kind of backpacker, more Kanye West type feel. So it's kind of an in between like probably someone like, Cameron and Kanye West is somewhere in that sort of orientation as far as that kind of goes. But it is a nice highlight. It's very hooky, commercial. The second single is Acid Rain. And this is kind of a blue blood, introspective kind of tune. It's soulful in like a druggy sense, and it's kind of a halfway backpacker type bop, I would definitely kind of say. The thing about this song is it doesn't really have a chorus that much on there. The chorus is at the very end. It's just really like an extenuated kind of verse as far as that kind of goes. And I did like that concept somewhat. I would have liked it in more of like a typical kind of song format with a verse, chorus, and some of that stuff, because the chorus was actually pretty good at the tail end of the song. I would definitely have to say it's mainly just like a more introspective kind of ruminating type tune as far as that kind of goes. The sort of stuff that Mac Miller and Wiz Khalifa kind of do in this kind of thought-provoking kind of smoke one kind of tune. It's soulful, but the thing I like about this project is it's not shy about its recreational usage on this particular project. So even when you get these introspective tunes, you got to keep in mind that Chance the Rapper was probably smoking a few swishers, that type of stuff, as he did these. So it's just kind of the concept where he is thought provoking and kind of has some of that backpacker appeal, but he does also get stoned also. So this is kind of the concept that it's commercial and it pulls off that Kanye West type vibe, but this is more heavy on like the smoke edge and that type of stuff. So it's just kind of like, just a more kind of edgy kind of sense of what backpacker type feels would typically be. There's 14 songs on this mixtape, and minus like the interlude that leaves 13 songs. So that's really 13 songs on here, and out of those 13 songs I wound up recommending to you 10. So this is going to get a pretty rave score. I'll go ahead and say the only 3 songs I didn't enjoy were just the good ass intro, the good ass outro, and then like Everybody's Something. So basically the intro and the outro were just kind of more jazzy type songs and kind of gospel almost. I didn't really like the good ass intro because that one was just kind of a gospel type song and kind of had a lot of jazz and just kind of more just extremely kind of upbeat kind of energy about it that just didn't quite have the right affability about it. And it's the same thing with Everything's Good. That was just kind of a more jazzy one that just didn't really fit the context of the rest of the project. Some of these are the intro and outro just didn't really convey the quality of the project that well. And then Everybody's Something is just kind of a more East Coast kind of boom bap beat. That was another poor production on here that just didn't suit that well. But that's really about it. I mean, this mixtape's going to get a 10 out of 10 because I like that many songs. But just to say those 3 brief songs were just like the 3 blunders that just didn't keep up as well. But yeah, it's just basically concept. Most of this album's pretty stellar, so I just would have to say super stellar and that type of stuff. So a real immediate highlight on here is Nah Nah. This is like a real kind of claustrophobic heavy smoke tune with like some super high feels about it, and it's got some good affable energy. I mean, the thing about Chance the Rapper and some of his ad libs on these songs is he's not full blown goofy, but he kind of is a little bit more lackadaisical with his approach towards rapping and stuff, and it can be kind of funny. He seems like he'd be a fun cat to smoke with just because of his kind of affability, just in kind of his more loose approach towards rapping and that type of stuff, and he kind of does that extremely well with Nana. This has a real good chorus on there, and this is a real good song. This is like one where I think you'd really smoke, like I was saying, pretty heavily as far as that kind of goes. It's a good one to he's kind of like a more kind of relaxed, but not quite as sheer crazy version of ODB, but he's kind of in that relative valve and vein as ODB, just kind of that more off the wall kind of randomness about him. That's kind of the concept. Nana is just a good one. He kind of does that in a lot of these songs. One of the best songs on this mixtape is Lost. This is a dreary kind of ladies song. It's a sluggish kind of malaise about it, and this is an evening kind of wind down gem. It really has a beautiful sample on here. It's just a great sample. I want to say that this sample is also on Dr. Dre's The Chronic. I remember it was like one of those songs on there. It's kind of an album cut. It wasn't a single off The Chronic, but it was an album cut off there. It's just a great sample, beautiful sample on here. It's really kind of a dreary kind of ladies song that just works extremely well and just kind of has that real kind of sluggish and just drawn out and kind of strung out malaise about it that just works extremely well. So that's a highlight. Another highlight is Cocoa Butter Kisses, which has Vic Mensa and Twista on there. I wasn't expecting Twista to be on there. Twista's from Chicago also, so it's good to kind of get Twista just on a mixtape and that type of stuff. Cocoa Butter Kisses is a more getting around kind of bop. It's a getting around bop kind of in a druggy sense, and it's a song with remorse about such things, kind of where Chance the Rapper talks about missing his cocoa butter kisses from his family and that type of stuff. So it's kind of being out and about, but kind of having remorse about it in that sort of sense. And it's just got some nice sleaze about it. It's real kind of sleazy, kind of coming home at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, showing up at your old pad, your family's house, maybe once every 10 or 20 days, something like that. Just not very often as much anymore. It's just kind of the concept of that. You like the kind of jive and kind of frisky kind of out and aboutness that that song kind of has. Favorite song is a nice one on here. It's some late day commerce and it's good for some evening activities with some jive, and it's a good outdoor hangout kind of song. I would definitely say this is definitely one that has some alert kind of energy and a lot more kind of riveting liveliness about it, that just has a lot more kind of this festive kind of feels, just in a more kind of outdoor bound kind of sense. It's not quite just hanging out on the couch and indoor kind of video game type stuff as far as that kind of goes, sports game kind of stuff. I would say it's definitely out and about, just kind of being more with the, it's definitely more out and about, kind of being more jivey in that sort of sense. So it's a good one for that sort of concept. I do like the particular energy affability of this song, and Childish Gambino is on this song, and he fits the song pretty well. So it's a good kind of jive between those artists, I would say. Smoke Again is another nice one. This is kind of an out and about song with some bravado about it. It's just a regular kind of getting around evening cut, I would definitely say. This is another one that's kind of similar to Favorite Song, more of these out and about kind of tunes. I feel like Cocoa Butter Kisses, Favorite Song, and Smoke Again are all kind of weaving through the city type bops. Just a lot of cityscaping and city hopping as far as those kind of go. They're just kind of very much I get around type songs. It's kind of the passage of just being more of like a drifter in some of those type moments as far as that kind of goes. But it's just some good moments for that. Just kind of, I like that Ab Soul's on here. It's pretty good snatch to be able to get Ab Soul on this particular type song. This is another nice one for Chance the Rapper to be able to have this. It's just an overall kind of good highlight. I mean, some of these songs are not so much just completely oriented about that. I feel like Smoke Again doesn't strike me that heavily as much of a smoking song, but it does strike me as more of an out and about kind of song. I feel like some of these, I could see Cocoa Butter Kisses being a good smoking song, and Na Na definitely being a good smoking song, and maybe a little bit of Favorite Song. But some of these cityscaping ones just feel a lot more just kind of more ruminating and just kind of congregating type feels, more so than the actual being kind of strung out and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. But I look after it. Smoke Again is a pretty nice out and about song. Chainsmoker's a good one on here. It's a homely song, but it pulls it off well. It's a midday commute, and it's kind of another round the neighborhood type cut, but this one's just a lot more lackadaisical and more centered and kind of more wholesome in like its approach as far as that kind of goes. I think this is just the concept of like a cigarette smoking song and some of that type of stuff, but it's just a lot more kind of more homebound and not so much kind of yearning for going out and having a lot more ambition as far as that kind of feels. It's a lot more straightforward and more Chainsmoker's a lot more straightforward and homely and laying low as far as that kind of goes, but it is another nice one that just kind of has it's not so much like strictly homebound just watching television all day, but just kind of the concept of just just being in a more local residential type neighborhood, just kind of more gas station walking around activities, just getting some snacks, some of that type of stuff. Just like the concept of that one. So there's a split song on here called Push a Man, and that's 7.5 minutes, and it has two songs, Push a Man and Paranoia, and I recommend both these songs. So Push a Man, it's kind of an uptown kind of bop with some retro jukebox type feels, really feels like real kind of saloon like and just old school, something that Ice Cube would do, or just like something from the 80s, something back in those days, Beastie Boys, or just Run DMC, something like that, in a more lazy kind of drunken sense. It's a very good lazy kind of midday cut, and it almost feels kind of churchy, I would have to say. It just really feels not so much gospel like, but just kind of something you'd hear it just out of like an organ piano or something like that. Just kind of has a lot more of like just a more, just for lack of a better phrase to say, gospel like feel towards it. This really feels like the organs are kind of on that song a bit. It's just kind of an awkward kind of production, but it really feels uptown like. I do like the concept about it just because it's kind of a drug addled kind of song. And I do like some of these kind of more addled type bops as far as being on here. So it's just kind of, it takes like a pretty homely production and transforms it into like a real kind of ritzy stepping out kind of tune. So I do like that. And then Paranoia is another nice one. This is another one that's very similar to Nana in terms of some smoking songs. I feel like Nana and Paranoia are two of the best smoking songs on here. This is a very airy, smoky, kind of fritzy song. I would definitely say it's a good get torch song, definitely, and it's has some lo-fi kind of ambience about it, and it's an ambient kind of highlight, I would definitely say. So this is kind of a good one. Paranoia is definitely a good song when you're pretty stoned out of your mind, just to be able to have some good concepts of just zoning out and being able to listen to Chance the Rapper's kind of funny way of, yeah, Paranoia is a pretty good smoking song just to kind of zone out and listen to Chance the Rapper kind of be funny on some of these songs, and just his raps as far as how they kind of go. They're entertaining, so that's just kind of the concept about it. So that's a good mixture of some of these. I mean, a lot of this mixtape does have a pretty addled kind of feel about it. I feel like even Chainsmoker is just kind of a more homely song for cigarettes and that type of stuff. But, you know, songs like Smoke Again, Favorite Song, Cocoa Butter Kisses are also out on the town kind of songs. And Chainsmokers a more kind of homely but still relatively stepping out somewhat kind of song. Nana and Paranoia are some good smoking songs. I would even say Pusha Man has a decent kind of jive about it, just in a more kind of kempt kind of setting. So definitely kind of the concept on here is just getting all these. And then Juice is like a ritzy stepping out one. So yeah, there's not a ton of blue collar moments. I was kind of thinking more over the more I think about it. I think Chance the Rapper kind of crossed over more like in 20, I think Chance the Rapper kind of crossed over more like in 2016 and later in the 2010s. But this is some early good approaches to some of these, because he does have a lot of good sing-songy hooks on here. But I think the kind of adult orientation of a lot of these songs kind of negate it from being like a true commercial highlight. I think it was definitely pretty good, but it's just kind of in the concept of just like that still kind of underground kind of edge of dislike, still the crunchy kind of Mac Miller kind of college raps and just kind of drug addled type feels that it has. So this is kind of the concept. I feel like Juice, Chainsmoker, and Cocoa Butter Kisses are all three songs that have some real commercial bite about them, but not an overabundance of this project really crosses over to that appeal. Now, originally I thought that, but the more I listened to it just throughout this review, I kind of had to say that it's a good mixture. It's definitely got some appeal, and it's definitely something noteworthy to be able to bring up, and it gets a pretty high social score. But in terms of like the appeal, this is still more underground more so than above ground in terms of its commercial crossover. I still think he was kind of more a bubbling personality yet compared to stuff he did with Coloring Book and later albums. So this kind of thing. But it gets a 10 out of 10 score. I would definitely say, me only disliking 3 songs out of 13 on here. So that's kind of the concept. The social score, I'm going to give an 8.5 out of 10, because it does have some songs with commercial bite like Juice, Chainsmoker, and Cocoa Butter Kisses. But I kind of feel like those songs, in addition to some of these out and about kind of songs like Smoke Again, Favorite Song, and once again Cocoa Butter Kisses, I feel like there's some good kind of out and about kind of bops about some of this. But I kind of look after it, I still feel like it's somewhat underground in like the expression that it kind of has, where I feel like Chance the Rapper was kind of a blossoming personality, but it just didn't have the overall sheer hit that it probably would have needed. Like at least mixtapes like Rick Ross and Meek Mill and some of those type ones. Like Meek Mill had the House Party song from Dream Chasers, and Rick Ross had Stay Scheming and some of that type of stuff. But I just didn't see that sheer quality when it came to some of the singles on this particular project. Like I feel like these songs were good in a more kind of mid type feeling, kind of underground kind of sense, but it didn't have like the sheer kind of crossover appeal that he would get with Coloring Book and later projects. Like Chance the Rapper really blew up in like the mid late 2010s, but this was kind of like a primer. This is something where he was getting introduced to like the masses and that type of stuff. It was definitely a humongous download. Got 1 million downloads on DatPiff, which is pretty exceptional. I would definitely say one of the highest downloaded mixtapes on this site, but I kind of looked after it. It had a lot of appeal, but it just felt like it just didn't have the crossover. I mean, really, it's questionable to say that just because I think it did, but in terms of like Billboard chart success, it's kind of questionable about that. I just feel like it didn't quite have the breakout kind of territory quite yet, but it's just kind of the concept about it. It did do damage, but it just didn't really have the chart appeal as far as that kind of goes. But Social Score gets an 8.5. In terms of the future, like Chance the Rapper has been quiet for quite some time. It's been actually a while. I want to say that possibly the last project that he dropped was The Big Day in 2019. So I need to get to some of these and see some more of them. I do remember this project from several years ago, but I would have to say I'm going to have to get to some more of these. But this is pretty solid. Like I said, I gave this a 10 out of 10. And Social Score gets an 8.5, but the Score gets a 10 out of 10 because there is some sheer quality on here. So just if you are looking to kind of say like that, if you just don't want to pay attention to your social circle, I would definitely say this is a pretty sheer highlight. It's just about the convincing of that topic of getting that expressed to others. But it is a 10 out of 10.